Hello, so I'm doing this video as part of my completely free writing course. There's a link below. Today I'm going to look at character development and the three top reasons that I feel people struggle sometimes to develop believable, interesting characters. Now, the first reason that I feel it's a problem is because we're afraid of being judged. So I did a season of amateur dramatics, I did 2 years at drama school, I did 3 years of a theatre arts degree. So most of my formative years were spent pretending to be other people. So for me it comes very easily and it's something that I enjoy doing. By the time that I finished that, I realised I didn't so much enjoy being in front of an audience. I preferred to be behind the scenes, and that's how I came to writing. And that is what writing is. Writing is acting on paper rather than on a stage. But for people who have not come from a drama background or a film background, it can be quite intimidating, and we can often be very afraid that what we're writing might be construed by other people as who we are. Now, as children, we all do dress up, we all do make-believe, and that is perfectly socially acceptable. But what is not always considered to be acceptable is for adults to make believe and make things up. And people can be a bit suspicious if they think that a person is not being genuinely themselves. But in order to be a writer, in order to be a good writer and to develop characters, you have to not be yourself. Unless you're writing an autobiography, that is going to be a pretty boring book. So we need other characters in our stories, and all of those characters are part of us, but not necessarily us. The things that we think and the things that we do in our books are not necessarily the things that we think and we would do in real life. And you've got to become comfortable with that separation. And always, people who don't understand art or haven't experienced drama themselves or been involved in writing themselves might question things, but be comfortable in yourself that it is okay to take on many different costumes and many different hats and walk in many different ways and say things that you do not believe and you would not say in real life, but in order to make an interesting story happen. Because in a story, if all of the characters agree with each other, if everybody is pleasant to everybody all of the time, and there's never any conflict, then you don't have a story. So your characters are there to embody thoughts and feelings and ideas that drive that story forward in whatever way it needs to move. So number two, the second reason I think people struggle a bit with character development is, as much as we're afraid of being judged, we also fear that other people might see themselves in our story and think that we are writing about them. Now, you need to be a bit careful here. If you have based your character entirely on somebody else that you know, that's a bad idea. It's usually a bad idea. Sometimes as writers we joke, we threaten, we say, you know, if you annoy me, then I'm going to make you a character in my book and I'll kill you off. We joke, but to actually base your characters on real people completely generally makes for very boring characters. There are very few people in this world who are truly interesting enough to last for 80,000 words, 120,000 words of interesting. But everybody has parts of themselves that are interesting. And that's what you're looking for, is almost every character that a writer develops is a sort of a trinket box of the most interesting things that they've seen in the world and they've seen other people do. So a character is not usually based on one person, but it might have elements of many different people that all come together to create this completely separate individual being. So perhaps I like the way that my friend used to say something, the way that they inflected something when I was a child, and it kind of drew me in and I found it interesting. So I might include something like that in this character. Or I loved the style of this model that I saw on TV and the way that they dressed, and I thought, that's really nice. So I might include that. You know, and it's building up towards this sort of perfectly interesting person who everything about them has something relevant to the story, something that drives the story forward, and can antagonize other characters or calm other characters depending on what you need them to do. So that said, you will always have somebody, and I've had people who've said, was this character based on me? And it wasn't, and it isn't. When I'm writing my characters, I'm not consciously thinking about any one person. I'm thinking about little things, little elements, gestures, inflections, style, in a whole collage of things that I've seen in my life, and some genuinely new things that maybe I haven't seen before, but I would like to try out. And that, for me, is how my characters come into being. So, it's usually a bad idea to base a character completely on somebody who is alive and living, and if they read it, they probably will recognise themselves and be annoyed. But I guarantee you that even if you do not base your character on a specific person, that person might still think it's written about them and get annoyed. So you can't really win either way. And again, as with the first one, you've just got to get comfortable. This is the way that art works. This is the way that we create things, and that we make something new out of many existing things. So, get comfortable. And the third thing that I think often holds us back when we're developing a character is we feel like we need to know everything before we begin. And we can bog ourselves down trying too hard to figure out what makes this character fascinating, what is the role of this character, what is their entire background, what do they do on a weekend, trying to get too much detail in there. And then we start to question, well, is that realistic or is it not realistic? Do I like this character? Do I not like this character? The point of a character, a starting point for a character, is just to go with something you find interesting and think, I want to see where this goes. And throw your character in there. And even if you are a plotter who likes to work out your chapters, line by line before you begin, there will always be points in a story that surprise you, where you learn something about your characters that you didn't know about them when you began. And really, you just need to let go of the control a little bit. Just fall into the story. Let the characters speak, let the characters act. You can always delete it later if you don't like it, but you learn about your characters by watching them interact with other characters in your story, through what they say, through how they behave and they react, and you learn the reasoning of that character as you write it. So, you don't need to know everything before you begin. In fact, you're not supposed to. Your own story should always surprise you a little bit as you go. And so those are really the three things. 1, we're afraid of being judged. 2, we feel that other people will feel that we've judged them. And 3, we feel like we have to be in control of everything before we begin. So probably my top tip on this, coming from a performing arts background, is look at acting, study acting, watch YouTube videos on acting and getting into character. Now, when I was at drama school, we all had to study somebody called Stanislavski, who wrote extensively about how to get into character and method acting. You don't need to go that deeply into it, but look at actors talking, watch their interviews about them describing how they get into character and how to develop characters in acting, because that's what you're doing when you're writing. Only instead of putting on the costume and putting the makeup on, you can, that could help. You mentally need to flick bodies and possess a different mindset in order to write your characters. So look at actors, look at the way they do it, because that will really help. And 2 quick exercises below. The first one, I've given some pictures, and I want you to select one of those and fill out the character development form. And all this is a very straightforward set of questions to get you thinking a bit more deeply about your characters. Where do they come from? What have their life experiences been? What do they like? What do they dislike? Now, I said a moment ago, you don't need to know everything about your characters before you begin. It's a good idea not to. But you want an arsenal of information there. You want a rough idea of where they come from and the fundamental things that make up them. so that if you get stuck in a situation where you've got your character in a room or with another character and you're not sure what to do, you can look back at their history and you can consider what makes up that person. So you're not likely to take all the information in the character development sheet and tell your reader this, because that might get a bit boring, a bit of backstory, slightly irrelevant. But there might be things in there that can help you to steer in the future, sort of, you know, your character gets to a road and sees a puppy on the other side. Do they A, cross over to save the puppy, or B, keep walking? That information might be somewhere in their backstory about what their childhood was like, what their relationships are like, who their friends are, you know. That can help to give you a way out of a corner if you've written yourself into one, as we all do from time to time. And the second thing is down there is I find that, as with the next session on writing dialogue, I find that doing character development in groups is really good fun, because if you have 4 or 5 people and you've each developed your own character, then you can play around with it. You can have conversations between your characters, and you can also do something called hot seating. So hot seating is just you getting really comfortable with not being you. And that is, you just have a chair in the room, and whoever is sitting on that chair is in character. And everybody else gets to ask you questions, but you have to respond as your character, not as you, as your character. And it can be very, very uncomfortable to begin with, because again, you've got to shake off this feeling that, you know, if I say something that I don't believe, or, you know, I behave in a way that isn't me, that other people will think it is me. But in a safe space with friends, and you all know that you're doing a character development exercise, do it, have a go, get comfortable not being you, or being an excessive part of you, or taking something to an extreme. Just get comfortable with it. And once you step up and you get up from that seat, you are not your character anymore. You are you again. Everybody should know that. You know, but it's good practice. It's a good idea. And it will hopefully relax you into make believe as an adult, which I think is a skill that is vastly underrated and something that we don't do enough of once we get into our middle age.